A count of three, two, one. Namaste, good evening, Adab, Sat Sri Akal. Thank you so much for everybody joining. I'm Ashish Banka, AB, National President of HR Sampark and HR Leader with Edelweiss. Another exciting session of podcast today, the third one, and thank you so much all for liking it, audience. Um, I don't know how to describe today's. I think the smile says it all of our guest and friend and a Samparkian. Dil tham ke baithiye, let me introduce you to Dr. Nidhi Dhanju. I have known her for almost 3 years. One of the most strong female HR leader in our industry and in the country. She heads HR function as Group CHRO with Praj. She has dearth of experience with Atlansho and Thermax, where she did some great roles. And she's also a fellow Samparkian of the Pune HR Leader CHRO chapter. Thank you so much, Nidhi, for gracing your presence in this weekend, which is difficult. और पुणे में बहुत मुश्किल हो जाता है बट थैंक यू सो मच फॉर एंटायर संपर्क फैमिली.
Thank you so much, Evi, for inviting me. It's my pleasure. I'm so happy and so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. Audience, the topic is, I know everybody would all be कि life of a CHRO. आज तो चांद भी हमारा है और चांदनी भी हमारी है. So, life of a CHRO, just to give a backdrop, we all aspire as HR professionals when we start our career as CHRO. And when we see somebody becoming a CHRO, we keep hovering around them, looking at them, how they do, what they do, and we go back and talk to them in the events. We become happy when they accept our invitation. We become happy when they get our numbers. Nidhi, first question to you: life of a CHRO, is it easy?
It's a very exciting roller coaster ride, Evi. Life of a CHRO. It's mixed with emotions. It's mixed with realities. It comes with its own set of experiences. No day is like a real. Every day is different. Every day is full of unpredictability. And so I think the most interesting aspect of life of a CHRO is there is a set of employees and there is an organization. And how do you look at bringing a balance, looking at the organization context, but also looking at employees? And how do you marry that both, the aspiration of the organization and the employees? And I think the life of CHRO revolves around these two aspects, a lot. So, so I think it's a very interesting roller coaster that we all as CHROs face on a daily basis, right from all the operational aspects where people will come in and they just want a listening ear, to having discussions with your CFO and your CEOs about what should be the talent pipeline, the succession planning, what should be the human capital strategy for the coming months, how should we plan the overall strategy for looking at talent acquisition. It's a mixed bag of exciting roller coaster, and I'll just stop there. It's beautiful.
Right. I could sense the emotions and the excitement once you were answering that question, Nidhi. A question which comes generally, I was talking to one of the senior leaders yesterday, and he mentioned the word trust when you are a CHRO, specifically when you are either reporting to a board, a CEO, or an MD, particularly.
Right.
But on the other hand, a CHRO looks to be the people's advocate, to be honest, the people's doctor, a
Right.
specialist. Expectation setting or expectation management from the employee's end, where they feel that logical ho ya illogical ho, everything will get approved. How do you manage that as a CHRO in an organization where you know that your one approval nobody will even question? But how do you manage those employees' expectations?
I must say that is a challenging aspect. And one of the things, maybe, that you have to really bring in into the CHRO role is insights, objectivity. So how do you look at a problem from an objective perspective? How do you also look at a problem from a heart? Example, I had an employee come in and say that, I want to go for, I've been very excited about my marriage and I want to go for a leave for 3 weeks, but my manager isn't, is not really up for giving me 3 weeks marriage leave. There is no marriage leave, but I have leave, but there's no marriage leave. And there is a lot of load on the site that I'm working. How will I balance this out? We actually worked and brought the manager on board. We had a dialogue with the employee. We worked a hybrid model of him supporting for few days, 2 3 days from wherever he was, because he was going to go in transit, where he was getting married was far off. We also got somebody on board to shadow that person and learn from him, while he was going to be away. So I think it's a mix and a balance that you have to create between the employee and the organization, and also to keep trust. And very 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 absolutely well said, Abby. I think trust is at the mix of everything that we have to do in HR. How do you keep employees trust and organization context and marry both of them? That becomes extremely important for us today. That employee has come back, he talks so beautifully about us, he's back, he's engaged, he's full of life, he's, everything is, now he has created a bond with this organization that's going to be very strong with us. So
Yeah.
I think it's all about finding those, uh, that right balance. And how do you lead with the heart? Because sometimes you can have all the policies, all the guidelines, all the this thing, but they may not fit in a mold, because human beings are different, their context is different. So how do you lead with the heart is extremely important. Otherwise, I think Chat GPT can take all our jobs away. It's a matter of
Yeah.
time,
I was
unless we,
just
yeah.
I was
Sorry.
reflecting what you said in terms of two important things. One is balance, one is leading from the heart. I've always heard leading from the front. I heard Prabir Jha leading talk about leading from behind concept. And today I hear Dr. Nidhi talking about leading from heart. I think this is something which will go on a long way. You have just set the right context for all the CHROs and head HRs like us just to introspect, leading from the heart concept, I think. The question which I wanted to ask you partially answered that in terms of how do you manage conflict, while it is easy, another question, I get a lot of questions, audience is asking me over WhatsApp to ask Nidhi, but audience, we have just 20 minutes. The format is set. Everybody knows that. So we'll try to see how much questions we can. A very interesting question has come before I move on to the set question, which me and Nidhi discussed, is does CHROs take policy as one of the most important weapons to mitigate all the risk? If something is not there,
No, I think that's definitely a very interesting question. And I would say that policies ka zamana gaya. It's more about guidelines. It's more about just giving direction to employees. You know, but today we live in a very very volatile work, and gone are the days when N was equal to 2000, meaning N is your employee base. Today it's the zamana of contextualization. It's actually N is equal to 10 or N is equal to 1. Like I gave example of this person, nowhere
correct.
we have a marriage leave or anything of that sort, but it's about providing certain guidelines, an overarching framework, in the direction that the organization believes is good for the organization and the individual. But beyond that, having too much flood of policies around each and every aspects today, that relevance is slowly coming back. It's not going to hold true for the organization of today, simply also because your millennials are changing.
Correct.
I mean, look at my own son and daughter. How did we grow up? We grew up in an environment, if my mother said sit, we would sit.
Correct.
Literally, if my mother said stand, we would stand. If I tell my 13-year-old son please sit, he will ask me why should I sit. you know so there's a lot more dialogue around why, how, why should I do what I do. And this is what the millennials want to know. They want to know now, they want to know quick, they want to have the feedback now. So I think policies से हट के हमें guidelines and frameworks पे जाना पड़ेगा. That's where I think we as HR fraternity needs to look at our own forward thinking.
Somebody commented, Mr. Arvind, that Nidhi is from manufacturing and she's saying so. That is path breaking. So thank you. I think, Arvind, the entire session of HR is all about path breaking, something out of the box thoughts. And I will take up that manufacturing wala question in a little while. Another interesting question, Nidhi, which somebody has asked is in terms of planning for an CHRO. Specifically whether you grow from an HR assistant to an HR manager to a AGM to senior manager, VP, and then a group CHRO, in fact. And then do you do, so the question is, does CHROs plan for a day, for a week, for a month, and how are they setting up their priorities?
Mm.
It's a good question. I would love
I
to
think it's
go
a
ahead.
very good question. It's very relevant. So I think we have to break the planning. So, for example, I will do my day's planning. So, suppose I am in Baroda tomorrow for a walk-in that we have organized. So, I will look at back and look at what are the kind of, do I have everything? So, I do daily planning for the next day. So, it will be around 9:30 in the evening that I'll look at my calendar for next day and plan for it. So, that's one planning for the next day. The other planning is on the weekly basis. Okay, what are some of the things that are going to come up in the coming week that I should be prepared about overarchingly. The next is the quarterly and the 6 monthly plan. So for example, I know that during, I need to start planning for my performance appraisal cycles from January onwards. So how do I make sure that I'm planning it? My goals are already set from the last year. Have I My mid review has already happened? What kind of listening vibes have I got from that? Have I looked at it? Have I reviewed that? Am I giving the feedback to my CEO about what kinds of aspects do we need to start looking around when it comes to planning performance goals for the coming year? How do we look at the budgets for the coming year for the appraisal cycle? So I think that it's going to be short nugget plans which is more on a daily basis. And as a CHRO, my advice to all of us would be that I've seen that there is needs to be at least 1 or 2 hours in a day where you're actually nothing on your calendar except for interacting with employees all across, not just your functional heads, not your BU heads, but all across. So there needs to be appropriate planning. For example, we have 4 factories. How do we make sure that we are talking to shop floor, we are visiting our workers, we are looking at site employees? We have any point of time 120 sites where my employees are working. So planning needs to be there, both at a micro nugget level as well as for a macro level. And it gets more interesting when you throw in a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old who I have in my life, and a husband who travels quite a bit. So it's very interesting. But I think all of us go through this. But planning becomes extremely essential for all of us as
Very
professionals.
nice. I think you just nailed it, Nidhi. I think not for everybody. I think this is a kind of a guideline which you need to do. Another interesting questions, audience. Please just don't get greedy. We have 20 minutes, as I have said. I have my questions to ask as well. I have another question. Somebody has. I will ask your question, Santosh, because you have written that. Thank you so much for this master class. I think the podcast has become a master class courtesy Dr. Nidhi that she is helping do that. But since you have praised in a nice way, I'll give this question to you. The last question which he's asking from audience, Dr. Nidhi, is he mentions that I am a CHRO or a HR head of a small size organization. And if I aspire to grow in my career, I will either become a VP in a big organization, or if I want to become a CHRO in a bigger organization, what is that things which I need to take in mind or consideration or change or attribute that I could build this journey seamlessly? Good question, Santosh.
Very good questions. Very good question. So I think maybe there's no right way of looking at how do you look at, careers today. They have transitioned so much. I know somebody who was in a CHRO position, one of my peers in a different company, and today wants to do something very different, wants to work with NGOs. I know somebody who has done different things and careers after CHROs. But just to this specific question, one of my advice would be don't look at it as always vertically. So for example, you said that you have had an experience of heading HR for a smaller company. Now what are some of the aspects that you have really nailed it? For example, you may be very good in operations, you may be very good in compensation. You might want to move horizontally to get some experience around learning, around talent management, around for example, if you're looking at I don't know your industry, but for example in core manufacturing, you may want to get those kinds of experiences. You may want to get IR experiences. So sometimes, and a lot of time, I would say it's very crucial to move horizontally before moving vertically. So look at careers from that perspective, and it'll give you a whole wide range. Because as you grow also, vertically, one of the aspects that CHROs have to look at is how holistically can you think about compensation strategies,
Hmm.
about learning strategies, about talent strategies, about N is equal to one, where N is your high potential, where,
Hmm.
employee engagement strategies. And things are changing so fast. All of us know employee engagement is not just about going out. It's a lot more about intrinsic happiness. So how do you look at that? So two things I would say: think about horizontal movements, number one, and have a very curious mind. Read a lot, attend such sessions, go out there and interact with peers. That's a whole host of information that you're going to gain informally on your resume, which is going to really help you. So that would be my
Thank you.
short
Thank
and
you so
sweet
much, Nidhi. I think this was a very nice, simplistic answer which anybody could pick it up. And also to add that you mentioned about employee engagement. Employee engagement is not only about entertainment, it's way more than that. And specifically to add, as a CHRO, you have to manage a lot of stakeholders and your team also. Because typically, as a CHRO, or I being a leadership role now, I could understand that technically you set strategies and you govern those strategies that these are implemented by your team. The implementation task is very difficult because you have to convince them that why they should do it, because these are the people who are just not blue collar people. They will come back and ask you 100 questions. You need to have a rational view to answer them as well. I think CHRO roles is more of a convincing role as well. If you can't convince people, you can't rise above the ladder. You will get hits from the CEOs, from the CFOs. Sandwich तो बहुत पुराना है. मतलब I think it's a how do I say, it's a roller where you have to roll every day. You have to lay flat every day. End of the day. That brings to a very interesting questions of IR you mentioned about. One important question which we discussed, and I would definitely like you to throw light upon, is your experiences of highlighting being a female CHRO in manufacturing industry. As I said, I could count, and we were discussing, we have only 5 or 6 women leaders in India who are heading female, who are female CHROs in manufacturing. I don't know why the count is less, but regardless of why it is, I will not go to that. But maybe your experiences, you work with thermas, and then you thermax, and you were doing L&D, which Santosh, she's also hindering about her. She built from L&D, and then she built to that CHRO. She was talking about her experience, if you go and look at her profile in LinkedIn. But how what is your experience of a female CHRO in a manufacturing where only handful people in entire India, there on the meeting?
Yeah. Very interesting, AB, and I think we should have a different session of a, a duration. But number one, I would like to qualify. It's been very exuberating experience, from the sense of a very welcoming experience for me. But having said that, there are definitely certain challenges. The first time that I went, and most of manufacturing organizations, if they are into EPC business, erection, procurement, construction business, then they will have sites which are usually in remote places, very far off remote places. I remember going to my first site in Thermax, and asking there where the restroom is, and there was no women restroom. You know, so you start from there. The conversation starts from there. And when you go to a site, typically the site people will not allow the phones, and the site will take you 6 to 7 hours. So imagine, that's the context of where we are coming in from. On the shop floor, when you look at shop floor, of course the reactions can be very different, so you can see the reactions very differently. But at the same time, maybe I would like to say that there is a certain kind of empathy and connection, which maybe we as women are able to strike, you know and build with various segments of workforce that we interact with. And that's especially true at the manufacturing level. So there have been certain challenges, certain surprises, certain this thing. But overall, my experience has been that connect that you make with your employee force, that has been extremely bonded for me. And I would like to actually bring in my women DNA into play into that, if you know what I mean.
Correct.
I
Correct.
mean, so for example, if we would go and look at our workmen on the shop floor, how they are interacting. आपको पानी, ठंडा पानी कब आता है, आपके पास नींबू पानी कब आता है, आपके रेस्ट रूम्स जाके हम देखेंगे, हाउ हैव बीन द कंडीशंस ऑफ द रेस्ट रूम्स, आपके कैफेटेरिया की किचन्स हम जाके देखेंगे, सो यू लुक एट द इंटायर inspection zone, and then you break it up. The same goes for sites, and then you sort of start connecting the dots, and you say, no, we need more improvement here, we need more improvement here. And I think there is a huge need for more women to come in core manufacturing functions, enabling functions as well as core functions, because I think it will just take the empathy level to the next level, just because the way we are wired, perhaps. But overall, the journey has been very exciting for me.
No, I think you gave an introspect also, Nidhi, because I worked for a year in manufacturing, and then we, even men, we shy away and we say it is tacky, it is not that great. We like the corporate culture, the startup culture, the IT. I think it is about a perception that it is not about industry is not allowing you to entry. What I could understand, it's
Right.
it's not gender biased. The industry is not gender biased. It is
No.
as people practitioners who are not willing to enter there to our to
Right.
having a
Right.
dichotomy in our minds. In fact, I think that is a
Absolutely.
very important point which you focus, and I think this will go on a long way when we start telling these things in colleges or to the younger HR professionals when we meet in different forums.
Right.
Last question of the day. I We can go on and on. I feel so. I feel so. I feel so indebted that I am having this session, but also feeling bad that I have to cut it short because the format is that way. Um, Now let us come back to the peer group. I know this question is there. Most of the CHROs, if they listen this video, will always look at what Nidhi has said. She would be our panel members next time when we are there. But current CHROs, let us talk about the current breed of CHROs who are there, of factories or of IT firms. We have to, the topic was, life of a CHRO, how do you make the work more human? In terms of how the landscape of human element changed in workplaces now, and what are the three things which you feel all the CHROs cumulatively are trying to focus to take the industry forward? Because I know every industry has its own challenges, and we run through the economics, macro and microeconomics of the industry and the GDP and all. But overall, where do you think the entire workplace setup is going, and how HR is driving it?
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a very interesting question, and I will just post this out to all my CHROs. When an employee is called and someone says, HR bula raha hai, what's the reaction of the employee on the face? Note that down. Yeah. Is the person scared, anxious? Is the person happy? Arey, acha bula raha hai. Oh, yeah. Must be something exciting. Maybe they want to have a talent conversation with me. Maybe, there's a career conversation. What's the expression on their face? It will tell you everything that we are doing as HR. So I think the conversation starts from, and everything else operationally, we have to be great at operations. There's just no doubt about it. We have to get our compensation right, we have to get other things right. There's just no doubt, at the day to day right, the letters right. And I think a whole lot of that can really be done right by putting systems and processes in place. I think that if I have to look at three things as CHROs, one is humility. Because if people can't connect with you, if you are somewhere there and people cannot relate with you, then it's very difficult to be in a CHRO position, because you have to be able to connect with different segments of people, right from your college students to your CEO, everyone. You should be able to connect and relate to them. So I would rate that very, very high. The second element is compassion, and compassion comes from active listening. Are you really being a hawk for your organization? Do you listen to cues? Do you know who is really in pain, who is not? Do you know who is suffering? Do you know the pockets where there are bad managers? Are you attacking that? Do you know how much pain a bad manager can actually cause employees? It's huge. People can lose their sleep over it. How do we look at that? How are we the heart of the organization, the listening heart? How can we lead with compassion? I think that's at the heart of everything all HR professionals have to do. And the third, and I think very, very interconnected, is happiness. it's a very subjective thing, but I think if you have a great challenging role, the organization is transparent, the manager is fun to work with, you've created an overall ecosystem where you weed out, places and elements that cause
Hmm.
tension overall, and create an ecosystem which is happy, collaborative, forgiving, and compassionate. I think you've had the elements.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. I think it was so apt and it was so appropriate that you nailed with the first sentence only that how does employees feel? And I was also expecting in my organization, if I have to go back, how does they feel relaxed, or do they become, they do just stand up when you go, or they are just chilled out ki HR aaya hai to, how they react. I think uh, at pockets I also realized that yes, there is work to be done. It's not work done, but while we also shoot 5 minutes to this session, but we can't help it. Sometimes we go beyond. But Nidhi, I think thank you so much. I think this is, as I agree with Santosh, this is truly a masterclass in a short way, which shows that the quality and the depth which you develop as a CHRO, how important is it to reflect even in a short span? And I think that is one of the important takeaway for myself personally with this interaction I've taken away, because we learn mutually. That is the second thing which you taught, that if you know something, I can learn from you as well, and you can learn from me as well. And third important thing which you talked about, which culminates to respect. If we have a respect for each other, are we good human beings at our heart? HR has to be a good human being at the heart, and before being the best employee, let us being the best human in the entire this world.
Right.
uh, in behalf of all five CHRO chapters, I thank you. I will, everybody will love it, and I've started flowing interest that why when you are conducting ours. But we will shortly connect back, and Nidhi will catch up in anyways in month of March when we have a, meetup in Pune. But thank you again, Nidhi. I think this is very important for leaders like you to show again that leading from front, coming back and doing this also gives a lot of inspiration to the other CHROs, that it is a shorter format. Also, it's important for us to build it away. A big thank you and a great, great connect, which I will cherish and build it up over the period of time. Thank you, Nidhi.
Thank you, AB. Thanks for moving the time and helping me with that. Thanks for giving me that flexibility. And also wanted to wish you a very happy
Oh,
birthday.
thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank
Nidhi. We'll
you.
connect back. And it was truly one of a very delightful sessions which I have conducted so far. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Take care. Thank you.
I'm sorry, audience. Thank you. Before you come and judgment that HRs are not becoming appreciable. Thank you so much for watching again.
Thank you, audience. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.